जय हिंद, जय भारत। वेलकम टू डेफ टॉक्स। दिस इज आदि अचिंत। डिप्लोमेसी का सीजन है। दिल्ली शहर में तो सब पूरी दुनिया आके बैठने वाली है। G20 समिट इज हैपनिंग। इंडिया इज शाइनिंग अप इट्स इमेज। प्राइम मिनिस्टर मोदी इज गोना बी बहुत, सबसे बोलते हैं ना, वैसे ही वो इतने बिजी रहते हैं और उससे ज्यादा अभी और बिजी मैन हो जाएंगे वो अभी अगले 5-6 दिन तक। ही इज गोना हैव हिज हैंड्स फुल। लॉट ऑफ पीपल टॉक अबाउट G20, बोलते हैं यार ये क्या अपॉर्चुनिटी है, क्या वेस्ट ऑफ टाइम है, क्या ये है, क्या वो है। आइए आज देखते हैं जनरल हसनैन के साथ वो क्या रहा है G20 समिट में। देयर इज अ लॉट ऑफ पॉलिटिक्स हैपनिंग। थोड़ा सा हमने कवरेज करा था इसके ऊपर। दिस इज गोना बी द नाउ द फर्स्ट शो गोइंग इन टू द G20 समिट। अगले 2 दिन के अंदर प्रेसिडेंट जो बाइडेन विल बी व्हील्स डाउन इन द दिल्ली एयरपोर्ट and the politics shall begin. Sir, firstly, good evening, namaskar, and welcome to the show.
Namaskar, good evening. Jai Hind to everyone.
सर, आई मीन, बाकी सब तो छोड़ दीजिए सर, आप अपना मेरे को ओपिनियन बताइए। व्हाट इज दिस G20 इन योर ओपिनियन एज फार एज आवर कंट्री इज कंसर्न? क्योंकि काफी कुछ लिखा जा रहा है, काफी कुछ बोला जा रहा है। हाउ वुड यू स्ट्रक्चर इट?
Firstly, thank you, Adi. Thank you for this very great opportunity. The beginning of the shows on G20, I'm sure next couple of days there will be a lot of things to discuss. And you will have lots of personalities giving out their particular views. I live in the heart of Delhi, and I live in the heart's heart where G20 is being conducted. I'm 50 to 100 meters away from the site where all this is going to be happening.
प्रगति
Why I'm
मैदान।
happy to report this is because my area has become a VIP area, and I can see flags outside my house. I can see security. Everything has been done up. The whole area is shining. I would have never expected anyone to come and do all this to my neighborhood. Having said that, G20 is a very significant, I think. You see, India's aspirations, and I compare it. Go back to 1983. We hosted NAM, non-aligned countries meeting. We hosted the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. Both were high-profile meetings, but that was the time of the Cold War. And we were on the wrong side. Perhaps what a lot of people thought we were on the wrong side. We were on the Russian side. It was the suitable thing for the times. Today we are on neither side. We are neutral, somewhere in the middle. But despite hosting that meeting, the high-profile people who came there, etc., it made no waves. It didn't send out any huge messages because it was primarily the third world, so-called the third world, which was meeting there. 40 years later, today you are seeing India break out into the much larger camp. Of course, we've been part of G20 for quite some time now, but the fact that we are hosting it now at this time. G20 is not about geopolitics, as everyone knows. G20 is more about development. It's about all kinds of other issues related to development. But somehow geopolitics always enters into it because around development also geopolitics always rotates. So
जी।
somehow or the other, we get drawn into it. And post the pandemic, particularly, this is the second G20 post the pandemic relief. You see, 2022 was in Indonesia, in Bali, and 2023 now it's in Delhi. Post pandemic, a new virtual new world order is emerging. No one knows where the world is going. The Ukraine war is there, which has created divisions all around the world. We are in the middle of this. And the geopolitics are attempting to veer into all these issues, while India's efforts are there to try and restrict all this to the development agenda. I don't know how far successful we are going to be, but for general knowledge, people should know that G20 is about the international economy, it's about globalization and the international economy. It's a lot to do with climate change, which is one of the biggest threats that humanity is suffering today. It's about other global matters outside the geopolitical stage. It's about global cooperation. It's about green development. That's some of the points of the agenda out here. And a lot on low carbon technologies, and many things on issues on fighting epidemics. The health domain is a very, very important domain within the G20 agenda. And lastly, on this generic aspects, there are 12 subgroups which are there. They are the working groups of the G20. They have been meeting everywhere. I think India's biggest contribution this year to the to the G20 summit is that we introduced a 13th group on disaster risk resilience or disaster risk reduction. That group has also met 3 times. And the last, I think, important takeaway from our discussion should be that almost 100,000 people have visited India as a part of G20 through the last 10 months. We've had 200 odd meetings. All 36 states and union territories have been involved in some way or the other. We've had the tourism meeting in Srinagar. We have had the disaster risk resilience meetings in Gandhinagar, Mumbai, and Chennai. So meetings all over, and the whole of India, the entire Indian media has been deeply involved in this. A lot of people are saying that we are obsessed. India is too obsessed with G20. I think India is simply obsessed because such an opportunity has never come its way. It's a great opportunity to showcase that India has arrived on the world stage.
And why not, sir? When you have an opportunity where the world is coming to you, पूरी दुनिया आपके पास आ रही है, why shouldn't you be excited towards it? And I think
absolutely, I 100% do that. And the fact that you are one of those nations which had the resilience to withstand the COVID, we suffered, no doubt, the pandemic, and we have emerged from it. We are emerging stronger from it. And we are taking the world along. We have virtually become the pharma capital of the world. We have become virtually the health capital of the world. Global tourism, the term global tourism is actually linked to India more than any other nation of the world.
Yeah.
So with all this happening outside the geopolitical sphere, why shouldn't India take advantage of it and further its own progress?
True, sir. So what is our positioning? What is our structure? What did we envisage? Since we are on the subject, it's an opportunity for us, and oh Lord, what was our positioning for the G20 right to begin with, sir?
See, when you say positioning, yes, we took over from Indonesia, which is also a very proactive nation. We had to hand over to Brazil, and subsequently with that they had to hand over to South Africa. You can see the BRICS countries, 3 BRICS countries are involved in this. We were very clear that our emphasis here is on development, and we are going to make it a sustainable. We are going to have an agenda which can be carried forward to the next nation and to the next nation thereafter. Our position was also very clear that we are not going to allow G20 to be hijacked for any geopolitical agenda. And I think we have managed it. The foreign ministers conference, even that, you found all the foreign ministers generally attended it. We managed to restrict the agenda. There was a lot of attempts to try and hijack things here and there, but we managed to restrict it. Yes. But all the meetings on the other agenda items, the other subgroups, the working groups, have had very successful meetings. They've been able to carry forward the agenda. We always knew that it is not easy to be able to draw some kind of a consensus on climate, on green technologies, on issues like that. Just like there's going to be no consensus on geopolitics, we will try and come as close to consensus as possible. Attempt to try and get a full consensus is pointless. So we will take it as much as forward as possible. I think India has been able to achieve that with the high-profile personality of our Honorable Prime Minister, who has been driving this himself, and the Sherpa, who has done a marvelous job, I think, the Ministry of External Affairs, the Foreign Minister himself. Everyone has put in their bit into it, and I think it is now almost converging to a larger success than what was even expected. But at the end of the day, I know that you will ask this question and you and I will discuss this, the absence of some high-profile personalities, political personalities, geopolitical personalities, is obviously going to make a difference here. That aspect needs to be discussed separately.
So there are two things that, these absences, absenteeism, if I may, or bunking, for the lack of a worst word, जो हो रहा है, what we can see around us is one because of polarization. The world is literally divided into two camps. BRICS के अंदर the try was to bring that second camp alive, the anti-West camp. The Chinese tried it quite a bit. They positioned it as a counter to the G7, and these were the dialogues coming out of China, and as a matter of fact, from Xi Jinping as well. The Russians have this whole war in their this thing. The Mexican president doesn't go anywhere as it is, so he doesn't travel. So that's a different. That's the three major guys who are not coming in. But so, how do you look at the polarization in the world? Because are we heading in for that same sort of a Cold War scenario where people are just not ready to sit in the same room and have a chat?
See, it's a strange paradox, Adi, that at the same time you're finding various high-profile ministers from the United States government, from the Biden administration, who are visiting Beijing
Yeah.
to revive trade talks, trade ties, methodologies of getting together, money on issues on finances, etc. While at the same time they're not prepared to come the Chinese are not prepared to, or rather, the president is not willing to come and talk at the highest level at a platform which offers you that capability to be able to talk to your counterparts. I think very largely this smacks of defeatism. Very strong term I'm using, I'm sorry. It smacks of defeatism. It comes out right from Ukraine itself, that which is at the heart of the matter. Right? The Cold War was a generic thing of that time, but today it is on specifics. It is the specific issue of Ukraine on which everything is stuck at the moment. That is where the polarization has come from. We thought the world has overcome the pandemic and there will now be some convergence on issues of globalization and global finance and things like that. Exactly the opposite is happening with the Ukraine. And China was supposed to play a more neutral role, just the manner in which India has played a very, very neutral role, as you've seen. China was supposed to play that neutral role too. But China went the whole hog almost and has supported Russia completely. We have supported Russia in terms of financially, markets, etc. We have at the same time made sure that we have not supported NATO, but at the same time never condemned NATO either. So we are stuck to our middle path very well. But China, the United States are now drawn into camps completely. There is a huge Cold War. We are drawing further and further into a Cold War as the Ukraine situation seems almost hopeful and hopeless, with no possibility of a outcome anytime in the near future. We are looking at a situation which is going to be very, very awkward, and maybe for quite some time, this kind of a Cold War situation will continue to develop. Now, in the middle of this, a platform such as G20 comes, which should be exploited actually, but it's not good. We have to make the best of it. And the absence of Russia or the Russian president and the absence of the Chinese president is virtually giving a space to the Western world, NATO, the United States, and all those who are aligned and linked with them to rule the roost. India, by virtue of being a host and also being a neutral country to a great extent, will have certain limitations on how much and how far it can go in terms of the sides that it can take, the statements that it can make. Is going to be a huge challenge for everyone who's conducting this conference. I think most of the conferences are actually going to be conducted on the sidelines, where a lot of talks will be probably going on, including by India. There are almost 30 countries which are coming here. 3, as you said, not represented by the heads of state, but majority of the countries are all with their either heads of government or the heads of state coming here. So to that extent, the importance of the meeting has not been marginalized, but the scope, the scope of discussion has got a little limited. Maybe over when we glance back through history 10 years later, I would have been very hopeful that G20 New Delhi was the great change maker, which saw the world, changing towards the better. The absence of both Mr. Xi Jinping and Mr. Putin somehow is robbing this platform of that importance. And there are reasons for it why both the countries have not come here, which we can discuss separately.
A counter to that, and if I may be the devil's advocate, sir, is that, well, Putin, fair enough. We kind of knew that he won't be here. Xi Jinping, it's good actually because it gives a easier kind of pathway to our country to kind of get our way through, because that's one headache otherwise we would have had to deal with. Uh, Even a lot of people hoped that there would be a bilateral, so something would get sorted out in the border and this and that. But that doesn't take the credible threat that China poses to you. The border is just one part of that threat, right? So I would actually look at it, and it's just an argument, sir. So correct me if I'm wrong. That she's not coming here is actually a good thing, because one, it shows the Chinese weakness with their issues, which is happening inside, and everybody knows about that. And two, it gives us the space to maneuver. At the end of it, the power center is still the West.
See, Adi, yes, that's a way of looking at the whole problem. But another way of looking at it is the fact that I explained to you, the presence of high profile personalities always adds to the stature
Yeah,
of a
that's
platform.
true.
Of a platform. Uh, as I said, it is China which is missing out, not
Yeah.
India which is missing out. It is China which is missing out. It is China which has got aspirations much higher, and those higher aspirations can be met in an organized on a platform such as this, where
Hmm.
your head of state is heard, his statements are there, whatever they have nothing to hide. They should come and speak up front so that the world knows what China is thinking, what the head of state is thinking. After all, Xi Jinping is the man who's been heading China for the better part of the last 10 years and more, and is going to head them for probably the next 15 years or less. So it would have been a very good thing for him to come. Now, unfortunately, I think he is a little overawed. A lot of people say, no, it can't be possible that he's overawed by India. I still say he is a little overawed by the personality of Mr. Narendra Modi, who on these international platforms has been making waves and has done extremely well. He's spoken about a lot. Now, to come and contribute to his success at this time is something which perhaps Mr. Xi Jinping did not want to do. His own success, his own country is waning at the moment under dilution. The economy is apparently taking some kind of hit, nothing definitive about it yet. But all this is showing some negativism towards China. This is an occasion to come and speak. Internationally, if you have aspirations to be the world's superpower, you should have the capability to come in anywhere and be able to speak. If you've got differences with your neighbor, if you've got something with anyone, you should come and speak it up out there.
True.
I think Mr. Xi Jinping particularly feels a little anguished by the fact that whatever happened in the month of May 2020 and beyond in the relationship between China and India, he had not thought through that process. And at the end of the day, he's not in a position to dictate terms. And is therefore, if I may use the word, slightly embarrassed to be even facing India.
Interesting. One interesting thing that you've brought out is, you want to be a larger person, then be the larger person. I mean, and then on top of it, you try and put people back by putting a map out, which kind of backfired. that added the fuel to the fire, I think.
That just shows, Adi, that just actually each of these points only reinforces.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
China, in its strategy, and I've written about this, apparently China has not thought through its policy towards India. It is still based upon a trust deficit. It is still based upon the suspicion that India is too pro-West. It is harking too much towards the United States, and it can't be trusted. I think two nations who have a business of 120, 125 billion dollars in terms of trade, much of it may be in their favor at the moment, have or should have the capacity to talk to each other if they have problems.
Yeah.
I don't mean by talking to each other on through border talks. Border talks will continue. They will continue for posterity. But it's very clear that China does not want to resolve those borders. It wants to use that border dispute to actually score brownie points, which he thinks he's doing. This is what the Chinese think that they're doing, not realizing that actually there's no advantage that they're gaining out of this.
Hmm. So the Ukraine war is, I mean, I can't anymore say chugging along, because it's not chugging along, it's dragging on and on and on. It's for some reason, the Russians are also taking it slow. I think they're waiting for the new government to come in America to deal with somebody a little more balanced. Uh, I don't know. I mean, what's the game there? But there's a lot of anger, both the sides. The Russians have a lot of anger, evidently, and the West has a lot of anger, evidently. Um, will this war kind of, not getting into the specifics of that war, will this war steal the show again?
I'm tempted to say yes, but I don't think so.
Really?
I think Mr. Modi and the Indian External Affairs Minister are both very mature in their outlook and would not want the agenda of this summit to be hijacked by an event in which they play a neutral game. Obviously, there will be, I mean, now with the presence of heads of state, the stronger presence of the West and NATO and things like that, all of them will want to make their statements. But then you've got the Russian foreign minister here. You're
Yeah.
going to have the Chinese prime minister here. It's not that they are complete lightweights. The Russian foreign minister is very strong. If you remember last time, the interview that he had during the Rezina dialogue, it was stronger than what perhaps President Putin would have given.
Yep.
Right. So it's not as if it's going to be a cakewalk for the West to do. And I would strongly suggest, and I am inclined to think that the West would be also be thinking in the same way, that it's an opportunity where they may not be able to run away with this agenda. They may play all kinds of things, but at the end of the day, may not be able to run away with this agenda, because there is a strong presence of China and Russia also. I think by and large, references here and there cannot be avoided. References on the sidelines will be there, and odd in the communique and in the end. I don't expect anything to come out on this, obviously, because the communique has to be a consensus communique. Nothing should be able to come out on this. I'll be the happiest to see only development issues, the global economy, green technology, climate change, disaster management, and things like that all emerge in prominence in the communique at the end. But it's going to be a hard fight to even do that much.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'd like to take it back to the first answer that you gave. So one thing that you said, that this is not a geopolitical grouping. It's a more of a economic developmental grouping. So I think, is it possible that we would kind of harp on that was the charter of G20 is to develop economies and not to decide wars. So let's please fix that first, and then you do what you want to. So
Exactly. That is
that seems like
exactly
a
what
that seems
that's
like a card
exactly
that,
the thing which is going to be played out. At least from the Indian side, it will be played out to a very great extent. We are hopeful the EU and others will similarly follow on that. Although a, entry of some issues regarding Europe, and Europe is based today. European issues are based on security, although they are
Yeah.
based on economy too. But security seems to be the overriding thing at the moment, and it may just tend to get a little carried away with all that. This is what is evident uh, from most of the utterings which have been going on around the world. But as I said earlier, I think we have the necessary bandwidth. India is not wet behind the ears as far as uh, geopolitical issues are concerned, and can
Yeah.
handle them extremely well.
I'm going to do a little bit of a quick fire with you, sir, because these are going to be short, crisp questions, and then a big one to kind of close the show. But the first quick fire would be, as we were talking about the Southeast Asia situation where the Chinese kind of picked an unnecessary argument with everyone. I mean, I find it really funny that they have to release a map every year that their citizens and their army forget what are the boundaries of. I don't know what the game is, but uh, we led the way, sir, in robustly rejecting it, and then it came out from everywhere, which doesn't happen. How significant do you think that is?
Very, very significant, I would say. This is an old strategy, the Chinese strategy, cartographic aggression, as it's called. Every year, every periodically at any time, come out with maps to show what your, um, uh, the territories which you claim are all marked as part of your territory. India has never disputed this fact. India has always said, okay, yes, let's discuss. And as per the 1993 Treaty of Peace and Tranquility, it's very clear we are supposed to be exchanging maps. In 2002 was the last effort which was made to try and at least present a map. We have never received a marked map to tell us what are the claim lines. Where is your start point on discussions? But every year you must continue to put in a cartographic aggression once again. The idea which is very clear and which goes home to most of the international players is that China is not interested in resolving the disputes, whatever disputes there are. They're not interested in resolving. They are interested in perpetuating them, so that over a period of time, everything remains in the gray zone. India is under intense pressure. The possibility of India aligning wholeheartedly with the West or with the United States is always suspect. India does not want to sort of endanger itself, or perceptually endanger itself by going against China. It's that kind of a policy which is played. I think China has overplayed this card. And now with India, with whatever happened in 2020, India is, obviously modernizing itself, modernizing its army and things like that. There is no guarantee of any military walkover here. That should be very clear to China. There's no guarantee of a military walkover. You are going to come here, there's no question of a sustainable, winnable war either. This is what the Russians thought in Ukraine that they would do. The climate and periods have changed since then. So the best strategy for the Chinese is to sit across the table and transparently talk to each other, talk to us. Now, with their dwindling economy at the moment, etc., they are under pressure. And when they are under pressure, they're going to react even more. They have never thought through their policy clearly. And they are now running foul with many of the ASEAN countries in Southeast Asia, as is evident from the kind of utterances which have taken place from there, the kind of demands which are coming to us for military equipment, etc., from those countries. It's very, very clear. So, the long and short of it is, I think the Chinese need to mature themselves much more, think through their policy, and perhaps India can meet them more than halfway if it comes to finally a mature look at a border dispute or anything like that.
Which is, I mean, sorry to say, but that's you're looking at China today. It seems a little far
Wishful
fetched. So,
thinking. It's
yeah,
actually wishful thinking virtually.
a short comment on Modi and Biden bilateral, Modi and Macron bilateral, and Modi and Sheikh Hasina. These are the three major ones that I see. There'll be a lot of meetings here and there, but the three major ones that I see of consequence.
You see, Mr. Modi has met all of them in recent times only. Of course, Mr. Biden, a whole formal visit to Washington, a lot came out from there. It's just a question of taking that a little further forward. Not much has changed since then. It's just a question of cementing that relationship which is there. Mr. Biden is on his not last leg. He's got a year and 4 months left in this term. In this term, we don't know which way his presidency is going to go next year. I'm sure Mr. Biden would like to see India completely supporting the United States. That's the manner in which we want. Discussing various issues related to Sino-Indian relations, Sino-US relations, on the economic aspects between the two, the trade aspects, the entire aspect of supply chains, management, and things like that. These are all the issues we'll be talking about. And of course, a lot on India's military modernization, which is one of the major issues in Indo-US relations. Similar thing with France. France is one of those countries which has emerged as probably one of the biggest supporters of India. And the last visit of Mr. Modi there was very, very productive. It's just only a month and a half ago, or about 2 months ago. So there is only a repetition of much which has already happened, which will be spoken there. But each of these meetings is like a milestone where you tick off each time that they meet, something which is supportive, strongly coming out with some statements and words. In diplomacy, this makes a huge difference. I mean, there should not be yawning gaps between the times when two leaders have met, because lots of things change in those two times. So if you only met 2 months ago, you may meet now on the sidelines and reiterate much of what has been already mentioned earlier. It only goes to add to the value of what you have already agreed to, and perhaps also boost the confidence between the two nations. As Bangladesh is concerned, very, very important. I would classify Bangladesh at the moment as one of the most important countries for India. And Sheikh Hasina's personal presence here, very, very important. This meeting with Mr. Modi. Bangladesh is going in for elections in the very near future, and the future of Indo-Bangladesh relations are very much dependent on what is the outcome of those elections. So we would definitely like to hear a lot from her. I'm sure Mr. Modi will want to hear a lot from her about her perceptions and things like that. We've got issues in the Northeast. We've got issues towards Myanmar, the Myanmar border. We've got issues of drugs. We have issues of arms, narcotics and arms, both which are lethal combined as far as the Northeast is concerned. And cooperation with Bangladesh on this, because Bangladesh also suffers from the same. The cooperation with Bangladesh in this sphere is very, very important. And I'm sure these are some of the things which Mr. Modi and Sheikh Hasina will be speaking about.
Anything on Tista, sir?
That
Award
is,
will
I'm not sure.
That'll be
Go.
that'll be the
I
clincher
agree. That's
for
a
election.
sticking point. That's a sticky point, and it's an issue which could have been resolved perhaps earlier, but except for local sentiments on it and things like that. I think with both countries coming in for elections at this time, this may be a subject which may be pended for the future. I don't think there's going to be an outcome on this immediately.
So, coming to now the closing part of this talk, I want to actually come to a point of time where I'm going to ask you about two things. One is a dual sort of a question. One is about the joint statement. There's a lot which is mentioned about this. Is it that critical? Because at the end of it, it's also about bilateral cooperation. You may not agree on a joint statement, but that doesn't mean the other things will not happen. Is it that critical? That's my question number one. And question number two is, what is it that we have gained by doing these, the whole display of our country that we've done, including Kashmir and Arunachal, which of course was protested against by China and Pakistan? How do you see these two things, sir?
Your second question first, more relevant. I think a lot of people are perhaps within India are alleging and accusing that we have gone overboard in this whole issue of G20. I differ very strongly. As I said at the beginning of the program, These opportunities don't come your way every day.
Yeah.
And you are on the threshold. If you were a nation with 2.1% growth today,
Mhm.
right? No one was looking at you. You had major problems after the pandemic and you were struggling within. See the state Pakistan is in today, right?
Yeah.
You had hardly any foreign exchange reserves and things like that. No one would be looking at you. Now, here is a nation which is on the march, right? Left 40 years behind, 50 years behind, all that things of the past, but today come to a stage where you can contribute internationally, right? $3.5 billion economy, looking to be a $5 trillion economy, and beyond to even much more, 10 trillion, etc. Look, articulating an agenda 25 years later, 2047, you're looking at a golden period, etc., and the century of Indian independence. We're looking at all this. This has all been articulated. Why should you then make use of this opportunity? A lot of people have, accused India, and I am one of them who's always been accusing India earlier, many governments, and even this government sometimes, whereas their communication is not strong enough. We don't go out and speak about ourselves. We don't articulate our opinion. We don't send out enough intellectuals to go and speak about the nation and bring out Indian narratives, etc. Now, when the whole thing has come home to you, why shouldn't you use that opportunity?
Absolutely.
So I am all for it. I think it's given India a boost. And if 100,000 people who matter in the world, in some way or the other, who matter in the world, whose opinions matter in the world, have traveled to India, have stayed here 3, 4, 5, 6 days, taken some hospitality to an extent, visited Indian heritage sites, etc., isn't it going to make a difference in the world? You have never been showcased like this earlier. And then this is the world of social media. The past, you never had social media, you never had mass communication, the manner in which technology has given you today. So why shouldn't you make use of it? That's the way I look at it. As far as the communication is concerned. Yes, it's important because the final outcome of a conference, from a literal angle, is assessed from the communique. So diplomat will probably give you a better answer on this. But that's the way I look at it. And a lot is, of course, read from the statements on the sidelines, because you'll find the media agog completely. For the next 10, 15 days, people will be assessing lots and lots of editorials, and op-eds will be coming out in the major newspapers. Tremendous amount of intellectual stuff, analyses, and things like that will be there. But the communique per se is the one which leaves the lasting impression. That's the long and short of it, which is going to be put out here and there, and people are going to read it. A lot of people will not understand it. Those who do understand it will then comment on it. It will be a test of what has really been achieved at the end of the day in this summit. I have no doubts that we have the talent, we have the bandwidth, wavelength, everything you want to say, to be able to achieve this, because our diplomacy is of a very high quality and standard. And I'm sure at the end of the day, on the 11th or on the 10th evening, we are going to be looking at a very, very fruitful kind of communique which will come out from this summit, devoid of acrimony and devoid of some of the issues which are plaguing us outside the development of the social agenda.
I mean, it's going to be interesting, sir, because we see the Western narrative already firing across. We know the regular culprits, the Guardian and this and that. India is tearing itself apart looking at the G20 and this and that. So it's going to be very interesting seeing this going
I
forward.
think this is not an easy domain to analyze, discuss,
Yeah,
etc.
yeah,
Because
yeah.
this is very vague. It is extremely vague. A lot of issues. I'm a person who deals with geopolitics a lot, national security and things like that. But these are issues which are today of prime concern, and you cannot go away from them. You can't shun them.
Yeah.
So we might as well take a deep dive into them and understand them thoroughly.
Yeah, yeah. And the best thing is that the geopolitics is opening out with these little tensions all across the place. You've got the Taiwan thing, which is heating up. You've
Yes,
got the US
yes.
sending a fleet of ships into the Yellow Sea right now. You've got Africa, which might just
Oh,
explode
yes.
into a
Lots of
regional
things
war.
happening in Africa.
uh,
Yes.
there's a whole lot. So, and of course the whole economic situation, except for us in India and Saudi Arabia, the rest of the world is reeling with
Absolutely.
issues. So there's a lot which is
Lot.
happening, and
A lot.
it's impossible to kind of sum it up in even in 2 3 hours. It's a very
That's
vast
why when
discussion.
you say a world order on the march emerging, you see from 1989, everyone kept saying a new world order is emerging. It never
Ji, ji.
emerged.
Mhm.
After 2020, after the pandemic, the end of the pandemic in 2022, everyone said, okay, now the new world order emerging. I don't think this order is going to emerge ever.
Sir, thank you so much. I think it's going to be a good precursor. We're at the 5th of September, Thursday. We're recording this in the evening and it'll be put out in the night. It'll be great for the people who are watching. I've done a show in Hindi, so this will be a great English one where people can see what's the plan ahead for the G20. It's I really thank you for your very frank views about what's happening around the place. China seems a big problem, and I think we are dealing with it in as much as strength as I'm not going to say possible because that's a very meek word, as much as strength that has been mustered across by the country in the past few years. So thank you so much for bringing that out,
Thank
sir.
you very much. I think we are dealing with this whole issue very, very pragmatically and with a tremendous amount of maturity. Thank you very much. Jai Hind.
Thank you, sir. Jai Hind, and we will get you for that podcast so that we can actually do a post analysis of this entire thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Jai Hind, sir.